The tween years can be a confusing time. You're not in the single digits anymore, and you're not quite a teen yet. You start to experience the world from older eyes. In 1968, Mary Bell was just a tween when she decided to experience murder. Greetings, welcome to my channel. I'm Sean. I do true crime, murder, mystery, sometimes mystical things. Today, this is a story of an 11-year-old girl who murdered. When writing it up, I actually came up with a lot of pages on it, so this might be a little bit of a longer one. But it has a lot of interesting things with it. So, let's get started. Mary Bell was born the 26th of May, 1957 in Corbridge, Northumberland, England. Her mother was Elizabeth McCricket. Elizabeth was a well-known sex worker in the area. She was only 17 years old when she gave birth to Mary, and Mary was her second child. Her father was unknown, but it was believed to be William Bell, and he married Elizabeth soon after Mary's birth. Mary's aunt later said that Mary was such a neglected child, and Elizabeth unwanted her, or didn't want her. Mary also suffered from many injuries when in the care of her mother. Some witnesses said that Mary was thrown out of a window where she suffered a brain injury. Her mother also attempted to feed her sleeping pills, but she survived the overdose. At a young age, she was left home alone for hours while her mother went off and worked. And then it's alleged that Elizabeth started to use Mary in her sadomasochistic sessions, allowing clients to abuse Mary in different ways. She also apparently started to sell Mary to these clients at the age of 4. Many times Mary would watch her mom work with her clients, so she did not have a positive role model. Coincidentally, Mary started to exhibit signs of disturbed behavior. She had mood swings and became a chronic bedwetter. At school, she got into fights with other children. On several instances, she attempted to strangle or suffocate classmates. One time she actually used sand while trying to choke a young girl. She became a pariah at her school, but she still made friends with at least one girl, 3 years her senior, Norma Bell, who was her next door neighbor, but wasn't related to Mary. One student claimed that Mary's behavior had telltale signs when she was going to become violent. They said that she would start to shake her head and formed a steely gaze at her intended target. May 11th, 1968, a 3-year-old boy was found wandering around bleeding from the head. He stated that he was playing with Mary and Norma on top of an old air raid shelter. He stated that one of the girls pushed him off the roof, which caused him to fall 7 feet to the ground where he cut open his head. The same day, a mother of 3 girls contacted the police stating that Mary and Norma had attempted to strangle her 3 children. That evening, the police interviewed the girls. They stated that they found the boy wandering around bleeding from the head, but they never pushed him. And Mary also denied having anything to do with the 3 girls. Norma, on the other hand, had no trouble saying that Mary tried to hit the girls. She went on to say that Mary asked one of the girls if they knew what happened when you choked someone. She put her hands around the girl's throat and squeezed. Norma said that she told Mary to stop as the child was starting to turn purple, but she wouldn't. She continued doing this to the other girls as well. Unfortunately, the police would do nothing because of their age and just gave them a warning. 14 days later, they would regret that decision. On the 25th of May, 1968, just one day before her 11th birthday, she killed 4-year-old Martin Brown. His body was discovered soon after this, and John Hall attempted CPR. While he was doing this, Mary and Norma appeared at the door, but they were told to go away. So they went to Martin's aunt's house to tell her that something has happened to Martin. The medical examiner was unable to determine a cause of death and initially thought that the child died of poisoning. On the following day, when Mary turned 11, her and Norma went to a nursery nearby and vandalized it. The following day, the police were called to investigate the break-in. They found 4 different notes. One said, "I murder so I may come back." And then another one read, "We did murder Martin Brown. F off, you bastards." The other 2 are kind of nasty, so I'm not going to read them. I don't feel like bleeping myself. But if you look online, you can find them. The police just thought that this was a tasteless prank and did nothing about it. On the 29th of May, both girls went to the Brown's house to ask to see Martin. The mother sadly replied that they couldn't see him because he was deceased. Mary chirped up and said, "Oh, I know he's dead. I just want to see him in the coffin." Things were quiet for a couple months until the 31st of July, 1968. That's when Brian Howe went missing. His parents last saw him outside with one of his siblings, their dog, and Mary and Norma. His body was located at 11:10 that night. This time, the coroner concluded that he had died of strangulation and that the killer was another child. There were a number of puncture wounds around his legs, his genitals were partially mutilated, and a large letter M was carved on his stomach. They also located fibers on his body and his clothing that the coroner believed came from the killer. Since this was the second boy to die in such a short time, there was a massive manhunt. She's still here. There was a massive manhunt for the killer. Over 1,200 kids were interviewed, 2 of which were Mary and Norma, as they were last seen playing with him. Mary tried to throw off the detectives by blaming some 8-year-old boy, stating that he had scissors and that they were broken because he was trying to hurt a cat. Many of the things she said incriminated her as the killer, but they didn't really have any hard evidence. On the 4th of August, Norma Bell's parents contacted the police, stating that Norma wished to confess to what she knew about the death. She stated that Mary came to her and led her to the body. She said that Mary explained how she killed him and mutilated him. Norma even showed where Mary hid the razor that she used. The following day, Mary was interviewed, and she is a little bit more defensive this time. A forensic analysis of the clothing owned by both girls revealed that the fiber on Brian more closely matched that of Mary's clothing. On the 7th of August, Brian was being buried. The detectives were going to arrest both girls that day later, and one of the detectives was at the Howell residence when they were removing Brian's coffin from the house. He stated that Mary was outside watching the coffin, and he said that she just stood there laughing and rubbing her hands. He said something really had to be done with her because others were going to get hurt. So both girls were charged for murder of Brian Howe. When being arrested, Mary said, "That's right by me." That's all right by me. Okay, I don't get that. But Norma bursted into tears, screaming, "I never, I never." But in a written statement, Mary stated that she was there when Brian was killed, but it was Norma who did it. She also admitted to the vandalism of the nursery, though. Psychologists interviewed both girls. Norma was found to be intellectually delayed, while Mary was found to suffer from no mental disorder. But he did say that she had a psychopathic personality disorder. During the trial, both girls blamed the other for the murders. Norma's mother testified that a few months prior to the deaths, they found Mary trying to strangle Norma's younger sister. She only stopped when the husband punched her in the shoulder. A child psychologist testified that Norma's mental age was that of about 8 years and 10 months, and that he said that her capacity of knowing right from wrong was very limited. In the closing arguments, though, Norma's defense attorney stated that there was no real evidence against Norma, while Mary's attorney stated that it was her torrid upbringing that caused her to act the way she did. The trial lasted 9 days, but it only took the jury 3 hours and 25 minutes to come back with a verdict. Mary was cleared of the murder, but convicted of manslaughter on both boys on the grounds of diminished responsibilities. Norma was acquitted of all charges. From everything I've looked up, that's the end of Norma's story. So, don't know where else that went on, but the judge stated that Mary was a dangerous individual, adding that she posed a grave risk to other children and that steps should be taken to protect the public from her. He sentenced her to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure to an indefinite sentence of imprisonment. Mary was 11 years, 6 months. She was at the time, and still is, Britain's youngest female killer. Mary was detained in the Durham Remand School. It's a school, kind of like juvie. And then she was transferred to a second remand home before being transferred to Red Bank Security Unit. She was the only female among 24 inmates. They had no place to put her, so she had to be put someplace, and they couldn't put her in a jail, so she had to be put into like a reform school type of location. During this time, she claimed that she was sexually abused by staff and several of the inmates. It's never been proven, but it's never been disproven. A lot of people shunned her and looked down upon her for being that murdering little thing. They looked at her as evil and not human, so they just didn't care. While she was in these units, her mother would actually come visit her. She would draw her mom pictures, and then when her mom wasn't there, she'd write her mom letters. Eventually, she learned that her mom was turning around and selling these items as art by the murderer and letters from the murderer. Tabloids were eating it up and buying it left and right. Uh, and it was just, it was ridiculous. In 1973, at the age of 16, she was transferred to HM Prison, where she attempted to get parole. It was unsuccessful. But in 1976, she was transferred to Moore Court Open Prison. Uh, it was more of a low security type of working prison. There, she took secretarial courses to learn secretarial work. Of course, in 1977, Mary, along with Annette Priest, decided to escape from prison. Uh, they were only free for a couple days and like ran off to an amusement park or something like that and were hanging out with some carnies. And then they were arrested. Lucky for her, her punishment for this was only a loss of privileges from the prison for 28 days, so they didn't extend any of her crimes. Um, in June of 1979, she was transferred to the HM prison Arkham Grange in an effort to get her ready for her release. She worked as a secretary for a while and then a waitress under supervision. And in May of 1980, at the age of 23, she was released from prison. They gave her a new name so she could start her life and be left alone by the tabloids. On the 25th of May, 1984, she gave birth to a girl who coincidentally was born on the same day she killed Martin Brown. She raised the child knowing nothing of her mother's past. This was the way it was until her past caught up with her in 1998. Reporters discovered her whereabouts, and her 14-year-old daughter ran from the house to a safe house. This is when she divulged her past to her daughter. They were both relocated and given new identities and everything in a different part of the UK. Mary fought this to the courts so then to make sure that her daughter and her granddaughter both had anonymity as well. Their whereabouts currently are unknown. Mary never claimed that she was wrongly convicted either. She knows that the abuse she suffered was no excuse for her crimes, and she doesn't blame that for that. Um, you know, I guess I've watched a lot of crime shows, and I've taken criminology and things like that. And at 11 years old, are you really knowing what you're doing? I don't remember being 11. It's been a long time ago, so I don't really remember things. I think I knew right from wrong, but that's that. I mean, I remember seeing my grandfather passed away at like 11 or 12. And I just looked at him and went, okay, can I go play? Because I didn't know. I didn't understand the situation. So, did she really understand it? And she says that she doesn't use the abuse that she suffered as an excuse, but if you're talking about sadomasochism and things like that, there's lots of choking and things like that involved in that play. Could she have learned that from her mom watching that? And is that the reason she was always trying to strangle people? I don't know. There's been a lot of talk in recent years that things that happen to a child in utero and in the first few years of their life are subconsciously left there to help develop who they become. And if she experienced this stuff, experienced the violence and all that, I mean, her mom clearly didn't want her. What does that do to the psyche of a child? You know, I don't want to defend her for what she did, but I also really I don't want to condemn her very well. I don't know. This is a very, very hard subject. You know, yes, if I was the the Martins or the Howes, yeah, I would have wanted her incarcerated for the rest of her life, and no doubt about it, no nothing. You know, hang her, put her out to pasture, whatever. But that's as a parent. You know, I don't know. This one's a tough one, and that's the reason I brought this one up because I saw it and I thought, gosh, that is just a terrible thing, and it's sad because here in Omaha there have been, I think, a couple 14 and 15-year-old kids that have recently got in trouble for killing people. God, when I was 14 and 15, I was thinking about playing with my G.I. Joes, Transformers, watching movies, hanging out with my friends, and gonna get my license soon so I can drive. I didn't think about shooting somebody. You know, and people keep talking that it's because of the society we're in now, but this is 1968. It's crazy. It's sad. And Mr. and Mrs. Howe, I'm terribly sorry about your child. Mr. and Mrs. Martin, I'm sorry about your kid. And Mary, if you're out there and you hear this, I'm sorry about everything that happened to you too. It's it's a tough one. And unlike a lot of criminals, I am really glad that you said you weren't wrongly convicted. You were guilty. But you also shouldn't have had to suffer some of the travesties that you suffered. So people can hate me for my thoughts on this, but I think a lot of people suffered on this one, including the murderer. So, well, everyone be good to yourself. Peace and love you. Make sure you subscribe, share. I'm trying to get these out a lot quicker this time. And I don't know, just be good to each other. See you next time.